Hello and welcome back to Jaycraft. In this episode we'll be going through a video on a park that I built in my multiplayer server. We'll go through a step-by-step process on how I built it, and then just a couple ideas and tips on building when you don't know exactly what you're going to build, just when you have a sort of an idea of what you're going to build, because that's what I had with this park. So let's get into it. So I picked this spot sort of in the center of our city. It was a flattened out area. It was flattened out into a couple tiers when my buddy flattened out sort of the whole city pretty much. What I didn't want was it to be tiered like it was. I wanted a more flat area on the right side here that I'm flattening out now. What I did do is I marked up where I wanted to put the two sets of stairs and kind of an idea of how I wanted to build them. And then basically just landscaped a bit, tried to get, an idea of how I wanted to look. I knew I was building a park here, but I didn't know exactly how it was going to look, and so sort of just slowly building it by, taking a look, seeing how it looks, and then going from there. We have a beacon in the middle of this park, and we have them blocked off currently just because there's too much lag that's generated when we have them all going, so that's why that's covered by iron. And you'll see what we do with that later. And what we do here is I wanted to, because the townhouse is there up on a raised platform, I wanted to have sort of a level difference with the stairs coming down. And so to make it a little realistic, I wanted to put in, or what I think is realistic at least, put in a retaining wall made with cobblestone. And as you can see, I tried a couple ideas. And then here's the wall that I built. Tried a couple ideas again to see what I liked for a wall. And then here I made an adjustment to the actual ground leveling because I decided I wanted the gate to line up with the path coming in from the other side of the city, and I wanted to come in sort of on that same level and then drop the wall because I just thought it would look a little bit nicer instead of having the gate sort of on a lower or slanted piece of land. And then just doing a little bit of path fixing, fixed up the fence on the farther side of the city here, and then just got the path, roughed in the path going inside the city, just so that I had all of the entrances into the park sorted out to give me an idea of, where all the entries are and where certain things will be placed on the, get the exterior of it box lined up. And then of course you want a pond in a park. I feel like it's not a park without a pond. So I just carved out a big chunk, and as I, carved it out, I figured out sort of the shape. I mean, more or less round, but I wanted to not make a perfect oval because that would look too out of place. And then filling it up with water, which is always fun. What I do, but I don't think I showed in this video, is at one point I fly away and I actually grab a couple fish and dump them in the pond because I'm not quite sure if they'll spawn otherwise. And here I am, basically just put some bushes around those beacons. I don't want them to stand out. They have to be there because of the spacing. So just hiding them a little bit, just so they don't stand out. And we'll hide them a little bit more later on. And then this is where I get started on the pathing, I believe. Just sort of sketching out where that path's gonna go. I definitely wanted to go around the whole park, go around the whole pond. So you can kind of walk around the whole thing. Realistically, only a visual aspect of this city. It's not going to be anything we'll, use practically, but we both agreed we wanted to have a nice, sort of like Central Park in New York. Obviously not an exact replica, but just, a park in the middle of the city. It just adds a little bit of diversity to the buildings. And then there I am. We're gonna put a gazebo up on that hill. I just sort of, once again, like the stairs earlier, put some dirt blocks down to just, you know, sketch out the shape of it. Added a little bit of a dock in the pond there with a couple boats. And like you'll see several times in this video, basically, I don't know exactly what I want this to look like, so I'm trying, say, you know, dark oak fences and then going, no, I don't like that. Maybe we'll try spruce. You know, go through a couple different options and see which one looks best, because sometimes you might think one looks good and then you try another. And like you'll see later on in the video as well, like those pillars there, sometimes things get placed down and then you come back to it later and you're like, no, I don't want it to look like that. And you just improve them. You change it up and you keep constantly improving. I'll probably go back to this build later on and see something that I don't like and then just change it a little bit again. Sort of a never-ending project. As you can see there, I put, you know, surrounded the beacon a little bit more just to hide it with those trees, because I really don't want it to stand out in the park. But I do think it's a cool little hidden thing that when you do need the beacon, you can open it up and the light comes out of the park. I think that was a nice little spot. And then there I am just shaping up the fence and the gate for that corner. So now all of the gates are done. And it's really starting to come together because we've got all the pathing in, starting to fill in the trees. And then this is when I realized I think I want to put another gazebo over on this side of the park, but in the lower area. So sort of like you've got the higher one on the other end, the lower one on this end. And then basically I decided this one I want it to be surrounded by a little sort of path of water, I guess. Little, I don't know, river's not the right word, but just a little pool of water around it. Make it sort of like a little island gazebo, but also a bigger gazebo than the other one. I wanted them to be different, and while both gazebos not the same exact gazebo mirrored on each side. And then just, you know, placing torches to keep it lit up. This is a survival world that we're doing, so there's no creative, no, you know, popping in items, anything like that. So everything that we build is, you know, scavenged and built from resources we've collected. And that's why I don't skip through the rain, skip through the night, anything like that. I could sleep, but when I get building, sometimes I forget to sleep and just keep going. And here's a good example of building something and then, you know, going back to it later and changing it. I found this bench design off the internet and then I just didn't like it. And so I went and then found another one that I thought looked a little bit nicer. And once I took a look at that, I was like, oh, that's exactly what I want for this build. And so then what I did is I went and all the benches I'd marked out, I just started replacing them with, well, the actual bench. And then sort of shaping up around it, putting some grass and flowers with some bone meal, and then trees just to make nice little pockets where, you know, a bench would be, where you could sit and relax, take in the park. One thing I didn't mention is I put some I think it's called seagrass down in the pond there, just to give it a little more texture, and a little bit of seaweed under the dock itself, just to mix it up, make it a little more detailed inside the water. Basically, what I did around all the trees is put 1 or 2 bone meal down on the ground just to give just a little more detail with that grass, with the flowers. And then this is the part of the video where I realized maybe I should zoom in a little bit and show you a little bit closer what I'm actually doing. Behind this wall is our industrial zone. And so what I wanted to do was basically put sort of a bush wall to hide it a little bit, not completely hide it, but just to nicen it up and make it a little more like a park that's hiding sort of the industry side of things behind the wall, but not completely hide it. I still want you to know what sector's next to it. In this spot here, we're working on the small gazebo. What I'm doing here is just mapping out the blocks. I'm just trying to get an idea of how much space I have. And this is how I do it sometimes, just to get an idea of whether I'm even number or odd number of blocks without counting them. I just like to make an X just to sort of mark it out and then put some in the middle. I did end up wanting one bigger because it was just one too skinny on the width side of things. And then I get started with placing the stairs first. That gives me a good idea of where the building's gonna go, just mapping it out. I had looked up a picture of a gazebo just to get an idea of, you know, how kind of I go about it. This part there is basically as much as I had sort of went with based off the other design I saw. And then from here on out, it's all just throwing blocks on, seeing how it looks. When I actually build the half slabs around here, I accidentally placed that lower one on the left. But then decided it actually looked pretty good in my opinion, so I actually just went with it. And that's one of those things, sometimes you'll misplace a block and then suddenly you're like, oh, that looks way better than it was gonna look. And it's those, as the great Bob Ross says, happy accidents that sometimes make one of your builds just a little bit nicer than it was going to be. And then, like I said, another moment where I'm just trying to figure out how I'm going to top this thing off, what I want it to look like. You know, which wood type do I use to make it look good. So I tried dark oak fence, didn't like it. Now I think I'm putting an oak fence up there. And then I think this is where I decided I liked the overall build of the gazebo. Tried an in-floor light, didn't like the in-floor light. So then I thought, lanterns look better, I find. It just gives it a little more detail than putting a light block in the floor, especially with a gazebo like this. Then again, a little more just grass around, flowers around, just to give it more detail. Bring it all together into one big piece instead of it just being separate, you know, builds. I didn't like that tree. It was too low. You couldn't see the gazebo if you were on the path on the other side of it, so I wanted a higher up one. And then I also didn't like the floor. It just didn't like how the floor of the gazebo and the seats in the gazebo were the same material, so I tried carpets. But I didn't like the carpets, and so that's why I went with these spruce trapdoors. And then I also didn't like how the steps were, so I sort of fixed that up as well. Then I went to do the other gazebo here, just extended that bush wall again, just to sort of maintain consistency across the whole build. And then what I realized is I had to shift things over a little bit just because of that. Same thing again, just marking out an idea of how I wanted it. This one's a little bit bigger than the other one, but more or less the same design, but not quite the exact same. And then one thing I also did with this one is I sort of wanted to get an idea of the area and what it would look like before I finished building it, and make sure that nothing was going to have to be moved, because I didn't want to build the gazebo if then having to also, you know, if I didn't like where it was, you know, positioned, I didn't want to have to rebuild it basically. So I just sort of did all the water and everything around it to make sure it was going to be fine, and then I started building it. I didn't have enough torches down, so a skeleton showed up. And same thing as the other gazebo. Basically, just building it and seeing how it looks and keep going. You know, keep adding it based on, you know, just on the spot. And like I said, I may go back to some of these parts of the park, and then I might just adjust it based on, you know, not liking exactly how it was. But as you can see, I kept the spruce trapdoors that I used in the other one because I really liked how it looked. You know, just split the floor up from the chairs and just added a different dimension and, you know, other colors, more detail. And, you know, more use of scaffolding. You can't go wrong with using scaffolding. And what I like to do is I threw a music box or a disc player, whatever they call it, their jukebox, in the center, just so if you're sitting there at the park, maybe you want to throw a disc in and listen to some music. Like I said, sometimes you just have to start building and, you know, see where it goes. You might have an idea, and you may just, you know, you might sit on an idea forever if you don't just do it. And so that's what I like to do sometimes, is just start building, see where it goes. Your build may take a little bit longer, but what I find is you tend to come out with better builds anyways, because you may stew on it for, you know, a couple weeks thinking I want to build this, and then you just don't build it. And then when you finally do, you end up doing this anyways. You end up changing something because it wasn't quite the way you wanted in the first place anyways. So yeah, I just like to build it and then add some more grass in, just to, like I said, really give it that park feel. I don't like having, you know, plain empty fields, because they look too plain to me. Like if you compare the park to the field to the right there, it just doesn't, you know, the park just looks more alive, really. And what I did was, for lighting the park, for the most of it, I put sea lanterns covered up by green carpets, just so you didn't see the lighting. You know, I didn't want to put torches on the ground, or, you know, just lanterns sitting there. It just seems out of place. So that's a nice way to hide lighting, and I really like that. And we have a million sea lanterns, so that's why I just use those, but you could use anything, any, you know, light block. I put a couple lanterns on the dock there. You know, there's a couple spots where I put in some lanterns just to, you know, where they made sense, like on the left side here where I put a couple light posts up. But I didn't want to put light posts throughout the whole thing. I didn't think it was necessary. And then what I did to light up the water is I just put a couple sea pickles in there. Basically, this whole city is spawn proof for the most part. Obviously there's a spider over to the right there, but we want to keep it safe essentially. And then here I am again, just changing up the wall, because I thought it was just a little off. This has been another episode of Jaycraft. Hopefully some of the tips and tricks I went through on just building were helpful to you, and if you liked the park that I built, please like the video, and if you like the channel, please subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one.